So we have present Judith Long, on Zoom and, myself in person. Mark Martinez is missing, but, we are 2 out of 3, so we are here. Let me open the agenda. The first one on the agenda, and I clicked it away or not, here it is, approval of the minutes. Judith. do
I
we have
so
any-
move.
Will move, I second. So in favor, Judith?
I
Aye, Sven, aye, so here was approved, that was easy. So, we also have in the room, the, police chief and the interim fire chief, no,
Police captain.
police captain, sorry. Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
Police captain and, the interim fire chief, and, we, they're on agenda item 4, and then, you want to have a little kind of quick review of the land use working group charge and role for this subgroup. Judith, perhaps you want to frame this a little bit out here for, the police captain and the fire chief.
will certainly, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for spending some time with us today, and Carrie also. We very much appreciate you're just sort of bringing your expertise to the table and helping us along. So I think you probably have some understanding of the land use working group, but I'll try and contextualize it very quickly, and particularly focusing on the role of public safety facilities. So the land use working group is really focused on taking a look at what are a set of unique development opportunities that are being presented in the town, both on town-owned lands as well as privately owned lands, and really just trying to make sure that we are taking best advantage of these development opportunities from a variety of perspectives, mainly focused on public facilities. So that would include public works, notably the DPW site on Keyes Road, as well as public safety facilities, which of course are the facilities that are in your joint purview. And then also looking at questions of municipal office facilities in around town, and how those might be consolidated, improved, renovated, to allow our staff to meet their roles and also to best serve our neighbors. So that's kind of the general charge of the land use working group. And then specifically, we divided our working group into 3 focus subgroups, of which this is one. So one is focused on public safety. The other 2, as I mentioned, there is one looking specifically at municipal consolidation, and another looking specifically at public works sites. So our group, with regard to public safety facilities, is really examining the questions that I think are near and dear to both of your hearts, which is, what is the condition of our public safety facilities, including the main campus on Walden Street, but also the West Concord Fire Station, and in addition to questions of condition and the ability to, renovate effectively or update effectively on existing sites, there's the question of capacity and growth, and needs for the future, particularly with a number of new housing developments in the pipeline in Concord. And I'm sure that's top of mind for you folks, trying to think about how to best deliver those services and spatially across town where those demand changes are going to happen. So, thinking about those capacity and condition as the main topic areas, I think location is also part of the consideration, which is where this filters back into the land use working group, which is to say, do any of these sites that are presenting themselves, could they possibly provide us the opportunity to better serve public needs with regard to public safety? So it's capacity, condition, and I think location are the 3 main foci.
Just for the records, Mark just joined line, so we are complete here.
Hey guys, sorry. I'm realizing Friday afternoon is not a great time for me, but that's okay.
Okay, so you have any questions on what role or timelines?
I think maybe just to review the locations. I was thinking about. Just for my own, I think I know, but just
Yeah, I think we're, and that would come, I think, right to the next thing is at the moment is everything is on the table. Yeah, so we have for the overall group, I think, all 18 current locations of town buildings. You're looking at MCI, looking at 229. We are looking at, do we need to acquire potentially property? What happens if, let's say, we consolidate offices and we make something available? Let's, I don't know, pick a scenario. I don't know, like as we free up Harvey Wheeler, would that be a location for something?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so, in the end, everything is on the table. Yeah, Mark, you raised a hand. Mark?
Sorry. I'm trying to figure out if I'm muted or not.
Okay.
Sorry.
We hear you. So you just make sure that we know when you raise the hand that you actually want to say something. That's all. Okay, with that, perhaps, we're going straight to, agenda item 4,
What is going on?
which is, you hear us? Yeah, he's muted. Okay, which is more or less giving you the floor and opportunity to talk about the issues. And we had a tour of this location, and we had a tour of the West Concord location. I think the West Concord was the first time I was in, and for me personally, eye-opening. What your future needs are, and what you're, so see, you're living this, so you know often best in this from a day-to-day operations, what you need and what your thoughts are. And then we have to take it from here and see how we develop it and how we fit it in all those different puzzle pieces.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Um,
so who wants to take?
the only thing I just want to say real quick, because I know we've talked about some of this.
Yeah.
In the past with West Concord. I think. and this is just our views on this side. I think the priority is this location. the
Yeah.
campus. It's just so outdated. It's not even fun. And there is nothing we can do here anymore. There's been so much work done, and I think sinking any more money into this building, it would just be irresponsible, to be quite honest. So, but with that, I'm gonna fire Chief Thomas.
Sure. I'll jump in, so. I just have some notes, it might, okay, I'm showing up to just to make sure, so. Yeah, so basically to the criteria, that was mentioned, capacity, condition, location, I guess I would start by saying on the fire side, capacity is an issue, like the captain said, I can get into that in a little bit. But one of our concerns with fire station location is that fire stations are gonna be the locations. And a couple of reasons for that are, right now, and we mentioned this briefly at the other tour, so let me know if I'm being, redundant or you want me to streamline, I'd be happy to. But both stations currently, where they are, serve two really good purposes, one of which is, they both are near the downtown districts, which are older districts, historical districts, from the fire protection side. At least if we're not tied up on other runs, we're available from the station, we're pretty close for a fire response. And they also are both in, kind of well located in a core of a lot of our run responses. So that's led us to, when we look at compliance standards for meeting response times, we're not quite what the goal is, which is 90% of the call volume arriving within 6 minutes, roughly 6 minutes. There's some tweaks here and there, but roughly 6 minutes from time of call to time of first arrival. So we're meeting that benchmark for both fire and EMS about 80% of the time, based on a couple of factors, one of which is station location, because they are in a pretty decent location for a lot of the core volume as of today. And what's added to that is the addition of the ambulance in West Concord and some staffing increases over the years to address the increased demand. So our priority wherever we end up would certainly be a location, because location will have a big impact on response times. And then aside of that, let me know if you want any details on capacity of the
Yeah,
building. I
would-
mean,
just one thing that interests me, just to get your view is, we saw in the population numbers of Concord that over the last, like, say, 5-ish years, the population went down. So did you see any change in your kind of requests, or how many calls you get, or?
for us, no, and I just want to make sure I'm slightly, but I believe that the population fluctuation we've seen, because we look at that when we're applying for grants and different things, is the off year, there's a year when the prison population is counted in the census. And then there's years that a prison isn't counted. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
No, it didn't
Population
look like
going down.
that,
Okay, so it looked like true population is going down.
yeah.
Okay.
Can I just jump in on that for 1 second?
Yeah.
That's the nighttime population of the town. It fluctuates a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what we're not taking into account is the overall growth of the town.
Mm.
And we see that with the limited areas in town to build town offices on and what's available out there. The daytime population, since we both have been here,
Yeah.
has skyrocketed with all the businesses coming into town, with all the economic growth in town. I mean, we can go back to Baker Ave, it's essentially a big parking lot.
Mm.
That's changed. There's Emerson has campus over there.
Couple.
Yeah, so you've got a hotel over there now. I'm assuming the old Best Western is gonna be turned into something else. Paparazzi's is a new complex. There's a lot of growth that's taking place in town. So sometimes the nighttime population, which has usually been around 17.5 to 18.5, isn't really a true reflection of the
Okay,
whole.
so how do you measure the daytime population?
That would have to be, I know some communities do it. I've
Mhm.
seen this in the past where it's not a census, but I think they do a survey of who's in town.
Mhm.
And I could be completely off in terms of how they gather that data. But I think that would be important to know,
Yeah.
just in terms of who we're serving and why we're serving, and then how, as we all know, the traffic in town, how we can get from point A to point B in the most efficient, fastest way possible.
Yeah, because we want, for us to look as a whole group, and what we're doing is, we try to estimate what future growth, like MCI, the 240Bs and so on, what that is generating on demand, for example, for you, and what that means for our infrastructure demands, yeah.
You can expect, and again, I mean, Brian's been here since 91, I've been here since 92. And the town has changed dramatically, it's grown dramatically since that time frame. And I would just expect over the next 10+ years, it to do the same thing.
Yeah, I can go back and look at our EMS plan from 12 or 15 years ago, and I don't know if we kept precise numbers in there, but we did differentiate between two populations, the residential population, and in our case, which drives a lot of our run volume, is a service population. That's what the capital was leading towards, all the occupants and all of the medical buildings that we have in town, the hotels, the traffic in and out, the national parks, Walden Pond. So we do look at that service population as well. I don't have any number right now. I could look back and see if we had it back then.
I see the other hands are up, but just one final question on my side before
Yes.
we go on this. So I know it's like there were kind of 1,300 new multifamily units approved between, I think, 2010-ish to 2014, which led to a massive spike. And so if you have any data that shows us to say what kind of demand, how many new officers or how many new things you needed, because the population went so massively up between 2010 and 2015, 2016, that would give us potentially some real data to extrapolate what it means with the additional.
Yeah, we could probably go back. That was in some of our EMS study, our run volume based on some of that population increase, and also the service population increase being more medical facilities, more nursing homes. And then following those years, we had an increase in runs, which then drove some of the staffing needs.
Okay, sorry to that.
Yeah.
Judith, you have your hand up.
Thank you, and I don't want to derail the conversation too much because this is exactly what I know I was hoping to hear more about, so this is terrific data. You mentioned an EMS plan. Are there documents or, sort of annual reports that your departments prepare, whether or not it's annually or some kind of state or federal mandated plan? I don't know what an EMS plan is specifically. Are there those kinds of documents that you have produced in the recent past or are planning to produce in the near future that we could either look at if they exist or perhaps support you in preparing some new analytics to help us, evaluate this question of the existing and future public safety facilities? So maybe you can tell us what your reporting mechanism looks like.
Sure. Right now, on an annual basis, a lot of our reporting is at the local level, town level. It's pretty basic information, town reports, budget reports. We do put some basic run stats, our basic response time benchmarks, and a few of those are in there. As far as the report goes, we have over the years generated a couple of reports, again, going back to around 2010. We did a very comprehensive EMS study, and that was done internally, not because of any local, state, or federal mandate, but that was done internally based on our observation of how much we were relying on surrounding towns to come in to provide ambulance service, and realizing run volume was reaching a point that we had to address it. So we did a pretty comprehensive study for that, which included, I think a lot of those data points. It included the run volume, it included the reasons for the run volume, it included where the run increase was happening, West Concord versus Concord, and then made some recommendations for staffing to address that. A supplement to that was a few years later, I can't remember exactly when, we did a follow-up to that report, because initially that ambulance was placed in the service for a 12-hour shift. And then we, again, just looked at response time data, and some more, followed up on that data to make the justification proposed that ambulance now be staffed 24 hours. And probably the most recent report is data on our ALS report, the move that we're moving from providing ALS through a contracted vendor to transitioning to us providing it directly through the fire department. So those are the three reports we have. So I guess that's a long way of saying that annual report, we probably provide a pretty basic set of data, but we have done in the past and are willing to put together a more comprehensive study, and like we would for this, a study on this, which would include, current, today's run volume. We've looked at projected run volume increases, and they have kind of held to some degree accurate to our projections from that 2010 up until now, looking at whether it's residential expansion or whether it's expansion like Newbury Course planning to expand, how that would potentially predict. So I hope that answers that question on our reporting.
On the police side, we report annually to NIBRS, which, if I remember correctly, it's the National Institute of Bureau Reporting and Statistics. So that's all the crime data that's set forth by the FBI and the federal government in terms of what they want to see, and then they track all that data, they set categories on that. That shows the severity of crime in a town or a city. I think it's more important to realize what we're seeing is more call volume for things such as mental health, such as, I'll say petty theft, juvenile related issues. Mental health is a big uptick in the last 5 to 10 years. Hence, that's why we have a clinician in place. We spend a lot of time and resources dealing with those, trying to assist them, because again, I go back 30 years, the method was you basically lock them up or you ship them off the hospital. That's not the case anymore. We work with them to try and find the best place for them, the best result for them, to get them the help that they need, sometimes even if they don't want it. So that there are numbers we can pull on that side. We typically use them for grants. A lot of it has been highway safety grants over the years. But we can, if need be, we can plot some of those numbers out, I do believe, and show how that's changed. I mean, since we've only added 2 police officers to our staff in the last 30 years. When I got here, we were 34, we went to 35, and then about maybe 10 years ago, 36 now. We are probably due for an increase. And with a specific target of dealing with community services more so now than ever. But that takes obviously some research and planning and all that, so I don't wanna go off topic too much. One thing that we differ from the fire, our folks on the fire side, is that their responses are more data, where we're mobile 24/7. We don't respond from the station, we respond from anywhere in town. Our bigger focus is to have that centralized location where we have easy access to the whole town itself and to be able to get to where we need to in the most timely manner. The chief pulled up some numbers. He found an average response time of 9 minutes. But we also have to just be careful with those numbers to look at the type of calls we're responding to. We're not gonna go blue lights and siren to somebody that had their phone stolen. But we might have a really bad domestic violence incident that we have to respond to with multiple officers, which we will go blue lights and siren.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I've yet, and I could have just missed it, but I think we all have to agree on, what, when we start planning, and if we're spending, 50, $100 million, I think we need to look. Judith, I don't know what the standard is, but I would think we would have to look out 10 or 15 years. And it sounds like, and I might be misinterpreting this, a lot of the work that has been done has been either current or sort of reactive, meaning, current in what history has looked like. And I'm just wondering, how do we get to a reasonable future population? And then we can ask, the fire and police, chiefs, what service is related, is necessary to serve that population. Because Sven, I can't imagine the population is going down. You hear about Newbury Court, you hear about MBTA housing, you hear about 240Bs, you hear about, affordable housing on Old Marlborough Road. I don't see how the numbers can be going down.
My down number was just the last 5 years. With all the 40Bs, MCI and whatever comes after that, numbers will go up. Absolutely agree. And I think we have to look 20 years.
Actually, interesting that it's interesting it went down, I think, because it just did with Nathan Pratt alone and a few other buildings. I was surprised that
I
the
think-
population has gone. It could be how people, when they take the census, and maybe replies to it, but there has been some pretty steady, even in small pockets, residential growth.
I think you're right about the prison population. I think that typically is included in the census.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I guess-
we can slice it, but I think Mark has the point is, no matter what it is, looking forward, no matter what the number of population is today, it will only go up from here. Just assuming, even if you only say only half of what is currently proposed is getting built, the population goes up. So, and we have to look at this 15 to 20 year horizon, because we're investing potentially significant amounts in new buildings, and buildings last longer than just 2 years. So
Right. I wonder if on that note, certainly that type of projections outside of my expertise, but getting the planning department involved to see if the planning department has any 10, 15, 20-year projections. And again, from the fire EMS perspective, would also be looking at what those are, the nature of those. If you put in, a 100-person single family development somewhere, for example, versus the 100-person units for an expansion of Newbury Court, that would change. The demographics will potentially change the EMS response on that.
Yeah,
So, again, it would be a little more than just total numbers. It's gonna the demographics of the growth is gonna impact, is gonna drive it.
The older, the more,
Right.
Mark, you still have to hand up. I don't want to shortcut you.
Yeah, I know. So I guess Sven and Judith, I don't know exactly how to do it. I don't know whether it sort of sits in land planning or where it sits, but at some level, I think we as a town and we as a department and we a committee and the chiefs have to sort of understand what the target is. And I'm not quite sure what the target is. And if I don't understand what the target is, I don't know how to plan to get to the target. So, and I know Judith, we've been talking about hiring a consultant and having it done, but you know, and which I'm totally in favor of, by the way. I just think, Sven, it sounds like it's not going to be effective for us to ask the heads of the department to project population. But I think once we project population, then we can go back to the heads to say, what capacity do you need in order to service that population?
Can I
Yes,
just jump in for 1 second? Mark, I completely agree with what you're saying. That's a huge help, but one thing I've learned with some of the other buildings that I've seen go off for public safety, and the first one that jumps right to mind is Chelmsford when they first opened, because I was over there doing an accreditation assessment. First thing they said to me, they had just moved in and they had already outgrown the place. So I think whatever is done needs to have an eye on the future for room for expansion. That's one thing that was done with this building. It was expanded upon and it worked for a little bit. Many years ago. It obviously doesn't work anymore, and I think everybody realizes this place needs to be replaced. But I think if there's no eye on the future in that sense, in terms of having some room to expand and grow, then I think 15, 20 years down the line, I think you're gonna be in the same situation again.
No, I think we totally agree with that, Brian. And I guess the question is, you know, I think speaking, you know, at least for Sven and Judith, I was a little bit surprised that things of this place, the police station, were in the state they were in. I didn't understand the proximity to the wetland. I didn't understand that, you know, there could be flooding. And you know, as Sven said earlier, I think all options have to be on the table as far as keeping fire and police together on Walden Street over there, or separating them. I do think that one of the things that you both can help with, and I know that I thought Chief Judge maybe had put together, you know, the heat map, is to start eliminating places that are being discussed. So that my understanding is that 229 Main would not be a viable place for either the police or the fire to be located. Do you guys agree with that? And when you think
Yes.
about opportunities, where do you think we should be focused on?
So what I've always been taught is the citizens of this town want their public safety relatively centralized, which is why we're here on Walden Street. And anything much farther from here might create an issue and a headache. I think the place that we've talked about the most makes sense is the CPW location over on Kai's Road, and maybe even incorporating some of the land out behind Concord Oil in that location. It would strike me that it's a big enough footprint. We could set it up, I think, is how both departments want it. We could even have both departments in two separate buildings side by side. But I think the first consideration is the size of the footprint where we can land. Being up at 229 Main or being down at MCI, it's just too far out. There's too many complications in it. We still need to be somewhere, I think, in this general area. And there's unfortunately not a lot of options.
so but the heat map we saw on the tour shows more as the center is more in West Concord.
Yeah, basically,
And with all the development happening in
Right.
West Concord, we have to make some.
Right.
Some assumptions, but I think as we can assume, the center will be more and more responses to West Concord than in Mainland.
The one thing I would say for them, where they have a second fire station,
Yeah,
that's what's important, I think, for West Concord. I realize that I feel very strongly this is the priority. That's not to say at a given point in time, West Concord couldn't be built out more to accommodate West Concord. For us, like I said, we're mobile, so
Yeah.
we need a centralized location where people want to come to. And I think that does handle the residents from West Concord as well.
yeah.
So
So for you to say your central point could be here or West Concord.
Not too far out in West Concord.
Yeah, but let's say it's, okay,
I mean,
Harvey Wheeler. Just, again, it
Yeah,
doesn't need to be, I'm just
yeah, no,
thinking
I'm
of what
thinking,
might be in play.
so visual, I'm trying to
Yeah.
kind of picture it a little bit and. I guess I'm old school, I still think, I mean, if you came back and said maybe, just for police, because it was talked about years ago, Concord Health there on Ornac, right at on the corner of
Mhm.
Route 2 and Ornac. That's actually, I think, at least from a police standpoint, that's actually a pretty good location. I think venturing too far across Route 2 could open up other problems, especially with the amount of gridlock we're seeing between Route 2 and Main Street. So we kind of want to have that out where we can, if we need to get somewhere from the station quickly, we can. But also we can get back here in terms of relative ease, in terms of transporting people and whatever else we need to do.
Mhm.
For us, I would say, you're right on target with that, is that a couple of things, right around, if we have two fire stations where the two are right now are somewhat, in a pretty good location for our runs. All the growth and expansion, the bulk of which I, looked at, which is either ongoing or permitted or potential in the pipeline, a lot of that is in West Concord, so that would, West Concord is just gonna continue to, the bulk of our runs are probably gonna be at a higher percentage in West Concord compared to here. So that does two things for us as we look at it. As we look at building stations, renovating or building, is there's some consideration for us that West Concord might be a bigger priority. And that's for a couple of reasons. One of which would be if that is where right now about 2/3 of our run volume is in West Concord already. And if that's where the growth is, that's just, again, that's going to continue to increase. And so that could also mean, depending on the growth, if there's staffing adjustments or even a staffing increase that have to happen, there's nowhere near the space at Station 2 right now. And second is we're very constrained with the size of the apparatus bays as far as what we can purchase for fire trucks and ambulances. So for us, the locations are in decent areas right outside of there, but which one is the priority? I think that would involve a little more data research, but Station 2 is the one that we've outgrown the most, but that is our growth area, so that's a factor.
Yeah, could you press that up here so that I see
Oh, yeah, we can,
who has hands up? And I see Carrie Lafleur, are you there?
I am sorry, I keep getting phone calls.
Yeah, sorry. While I was looking at the map, I realized that there is a large town lot on 416 Walden, which is just down the street here. Is there any restriction on this thing or?
So that property is owned by, well, it was purchased
Concord?
from the Water Enterprise Fund, I believe. I've talked to Alan about that piece of property next to the community garden.
Yes, the
That's the one you're
community garden,
talking.
all the way
Yeah.
to the station and everything, it's a
And
quite
then,
a lot, big lot.
yeah, so I don't believe there is any restriction, but it is a Water Enterprise Fund property.
Okay, well, that can be dealt with. Judith, can you put 416 just on the preliminary list, 416 Walden? On our list of properties, just to look at how can that be used potentially? And then another provocative question, Carrie. The high school sits at a massive lot with some areas absolutely not used. is there a way to cut something out of that piece of cake?
Well, I mean, that's a separate governmental entity. So
Yeah,
that,
but-
that would be a conversation with the regional school committee. I mean, I know schools, well, there's a rule of thumb for how much property any building has. I know with schools, it's significant for sure.
Yeah, it's just,
But-
okay.
Real quick, Sven, I think though that what happened was that with that large piece of sort of unused land that you might be talking about, it was, I thought it was basically concluded that we couldn't use it because of environmental issues. Carrie, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't with the town when the new high school was built, but I mean, there's a landfill somewhere over there, right?
Yeah, but that's the other,
That's
Right, so, I mean-
capital.
So, I mean, years ago,
I
there used to
think
be
that
lacrosse.
area is capping.
Okay.
Yep,
yeah, I think there are two areas if I look to the map there, sorry to the sidetrack here, but one is more or less from the Peter Center to Thoreau Street. That is completely unused. And then the other one is from the driveway from Walden Street, this open field.
that's the one I think
That's
is
the,
capped.
that's capped, okay.
And I don't think there's that much room over by the side of the Beatty Center, if I remember right.
That's actually larger than that field.
Out behind it.
So it's, I don't, can I share here? I'm not in it.
No, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay.
But again, that's something to just think about, but the 416 Walden is much bigger, that could be a thing to look at. So. Judith, you have your hand up, sorry, I was just going here in the room.
No, that's okay. I think it's one of the things we did want to do today was sort of brainstorm about sites that could be creative that aren't necessarily on our current list. So that, you know, we can look outside of town-owned properties if there might be creative solutions. So I think that any committee member or, you know, anybody, either of the chiefs, if you have ideas that kind of are a little bit creative, that we would benefit from exploring, please have at. I think certainly I was talking to Mimi Graney yesterday, and Mimi's helping us to put together a map of town-owned and larger scale parcels around town, which is terrific. And we certainly discussed the site that is directly across from Emerson Hospital on Ornac, which I think is 57, but I'm not 100% sure. But there are certainly some configuration possibilities there. But let me just backtrack for a moment, because I do think the discussion about sites and you know, what the chiefs consider to be important characteristics in choosing sites. I mean, that's a critical part of this conversation. And we're certainly going to need to actually write some of this stuff down in a report at some point. So if the chiefs, you know, not in this particular conversation, but we can start to work towards a document that talks about when the police station looks at the current facility, this is how it is not meeting current needs. And again, you know, we can use these three terms: capacity, condition, location. And there are other attributes as well, right? But we need to sort of understand in a very specific way how the current venues are not meeting needs. Because one of the things that our residents are going to ask us about is, this station looks fair, you know, as Mark was saying, and Sven and I think we've all said, wow, I had no idea that our public safety facilities were so problematic for our public safety employees and leaders. So we need to craft that argument very carefully, and it can't just be impressions. It can't be, well, you know, we're too crowded. We need actually some numbers that help us understand how the building is not working. So we will need some actual written verification and metrics. You certainly given us the response metrics, and I think those are all fantastic, right? So that's working towards that part of the list. But in terms of understanding how the building is not working, I think that we need to be very specific. And I suspect that before we could move ahead with, looking at actually replacing or building new, we would need to have a building assessment done by a consultant that came in and said, this is the problem. This is, it would cost this much to update it or expand, and we can't do it on this site. So, we really need to make it clear that an argument for relocating and rebuilding has all kinds of evidence to back it up. So, and we're in the early stages, right? So we're trying to gather all of our impressions, but this is what we're working towards. Impressions will not be enough to drive this argument. We need data and metrics, and at some point we will need a professional building assessment to move us forward. The other thing I wanted to say was the population data, which this harkens back to about 20 minutes ago, but I just want to make a quick point. I think, Mark, that we could probably come up with some very preliminary estimates. I feel very comfortable doing that kind of demographic forecasting in a very simple way based on an understanding of what's in the development pipeline. So I think that we probably need some working numbers that we can then pass back to town admin, because my understanding is that the planning department doesn't really have forward projections, and that even if we look at state data, it's very different. So the issue is what I call, or what's called in data analytics, this term concordance. And I've said it in a couple of other meetings, but each of the different decision makers along all of this spectrum of public facilities needs to be working with the same data, right? And I think, Mark and Sven and I would certainly agree. So we can come up with some preliminary numbers. There isn't time to hire a demographic consultant, to turn around numbers that will help us in the next 2 or 3 months. But certainly we can get to some basic numbers that we can then feed back to the fire chiefs. And also, by the way, we can indicate where we think those numbers are going to go up so that we could show a density map, right? That because centrality is spatial, right? There's a center of town spatially, but the centrality that I think we're looking for is highly dependent on density and distribution of population, right? So centrality has different definitions depending on what we're talking about. So the long and short of the population forecast question is, I think it behooves us to try and come up with some figures, because I think waiting around for other folks to try and give us at least some basic numbers that we can use to guide our thinking here, I just don't think it's going to happen quickly enough. So those two things, evidence and concordance.
Can I just ask sort of a question, because the chief had put together I'll call it a bullet list. When you talk about metrics and you talk about like numbers pertaining to this, I mean, some of the stuff that we've identified is obviously how old the building is, but getting back into the amount of space that we have within this building. And it's extremely, I'll use the word shallow. I mean, we don't have any place to process evidence. We can't add anything really in terms of internal structure to our evidence room. Our records room, we'd like to modernize that and get it out of the 60s. Our dispatch right now is temporarily operating right behind the screen you're on. And that's going to go back downstairs, and there is zero room for growth in there. It is what it is. And in terms of evolution and looking at other places and not even talking about regionalization, there needs to be enough room to be able to expand on that. Not in the given time, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So I guess where I'm kind of going with this is, what kind of numbers would you need?
Okay, I can answer that pretty readily. And by the way, we're also happy to, this can be highly iterative, right? Like we can go back and forth.
Yeah.
So I think a really great place to start is just with the lists that you mentioned, right? So
Okay.
let's get a laundry list of everything that is not working in both of your buildings. Some of those we're going to be able to come up with, quantitative. When I say metrics, like, they can be quantitative, right? Trying to figure out, well, if we need 100 square feet per employee, if that's the standard in fire stations in Massachusetts or across the country, we have X number of employees and we don't have enough square footage if we use that as a very simple benchmark, right? So we can do that. You can also simply say, we need a space to do X and we do not have a space to do X, right? So we can just enumerate issues and then identify metrics that help us understand the shortcoming, but it doesn't have to be for everything. But the other way we can go about this, which I think was in the initial email, is to think about benchmarking. And maybe it's a good time to transition to that conversation, although I know Mark has his hand up and I'm sure has another good point to make. But benchmarking, when you guys go to other facilities, how big are they? How much room do they have? How quickly did they outgrow? How many, employees do they have? How many bays do they have? How many trucks? So when we look at our peer communities around Concord, benchmarking, I think, is going to be a very effective way of demonstrating. For example, you guys know this way better than I do, but I know Lexington has a brand new fire safety campus. It was built in 2019. It's quite significantly bigger than the one in Concord. So we can compare on total square footage. We can compare on, metrics like bays, ambulance bays, so on and so forth. So that's what I'm talking about. Does that help? I mean, I realize that, we're going to build this list, but that's
Yeah,
keep in mind.
we have some of that already prepared. We also will be looking at some standards to the U.S. Fire Administration's recommendations for fire station design, the NFPA ISO standards for again response times, which we kind of covered a little bit. There's the OSHA. We're an OSHA state now. There's going to be some OSHA regulations for some things that we should be meeting, as not even on the response side, but just an employee facility side that we can't meet. And then, as you said to the captain, there are just a number of basic items that will say we need to do X, we don't have the space for it, or we need to do X and we're squeezing it in here because of that. So we're happy to put that together. We've started. That's in kind of some of my notes as well. And I think what will be helpful is now knowing that, and is there a timeline for that we should be thinking about to put these together? And I kind of threw together a whole bunch of different notes and thoughts, and with a lot of help from our staff. I shouldn't say I put it together, so I help organize it. But we can certainly clean it up and make a nice report that could help. But just knowing exactly what you need like that, and then when you might need it, a time frame, and then what the next steps after that might be, will be really helpful for us to prepare that data for you.
And Judith, the chief did prepare a comparison of what we have versus what we need, so I do have a document. And we can even build that out or add to it if you want. And the question is, when do you need it by?
We would take a draft ASAP. I don't want to speak for Sven and Mark. If we'd be happy to take a look at a draft, mark it up, bring it back, et cetera.
Yeah, we try to, as I said before the meeting started, we try to be super fast on this to get as fast as possible. As much as possible information needed, because we know there are iterations, we know we will have to fine tune things or just ask tough questions at a certain point. We can't have kind of the situation we linger along not having information. Yeah. But Mark, you have the hand up.
Yeah, so look, at a very high level, this is a sales pitch, right? And so the question is going to be asked, why in God's name do we need to spend, pick a number, $50, $75 million? Everything looks fine. Now, no one wants to scare the general population into, problems that are, potentially impacting service. But not only, I think it would be helpful also, and Brian, I'll ask you this question, in the long term time that you've spent at the police station, is that location a viable option? Is it too close to the wetland? Does it flood? How many times has it flooded? I mean, the cost to move people to the third floor and to, build out space and to rejigger things that conceptually should never need to be rejiggered. And the last thing we want to do is invest, we wouldn't want to invest. I think at some level, you and Tom and others need to say, not only are there needs
You're losing you, Mark.
based on, looking forward. Flood is a perfect example. Did you hear that?
So Mark, some of that I can dive into a little bit. This building, because of the way it was originally done and the add-ons that have been done, the room we're sitting in now is probably, we're about 20 years old. Nothing else can be done to this building. This building is systematically failing, and I'll just point out to come down to my office if you'd like a fresh piece of cold meat to stay that way for a few months, just sit down there because it come in, it's 55 degrees. This building just is no longer really functional. To do anything here, I don't think you could keep police and fire together because the lot isn't big enough because of the wetland issue. Could you potentially do one or the other and demolish this building and put up something new? Maybe. I know this is a historical issue in terms of how far and how many stories up they can go. So there's a lot of factors that would have to be taken into account from that. And then someone would have to be able to really look at it on the footprint and see if anything would work just on the space alone before we get out into the wetland area behind the station.
I think we're on the flooding side. This is not inside the 100-year flood zone. I think we're on the cusp of a little bit in the 500-year flood. At least meaning that it's less likely for some flooding here compared to Public Works, which has a big section of the property in the 100-year flood zone, and they regularly get water just up into the parking lot anyway. So that is one of the considerations that we've thought about as well.
Okay, but that would speak against the DPW side to move into a 100-year flood
Yeah,
zone.
potentially.
500-year.
But could that be built up like they did across the street?
Right. And, but yeah, that's those are all the factors that we'll put together in their consideration we would have. I know the flood zone is a factor to begin with, but a bigger factor is, for example, the EOC that we're in. Would want to make sure that the EOC is in an area that can manage when those events happen. You don't want it to be part of the event. We need to make sure it's in an area that can manage the event.
I really like that. I think, Judith, you have three criteria. One was capacity, the other one is condition, and I forgot the third one. Location. So I really like this metrics. So because capacity, I can see right from the get-go that this is not working. Yeah, and I think this is a case we can document and we have to document and all of that. The condition thing is, I think, a little bit a different beast to what Mark said, is that if people drive by, and I drove by here for many years, you say, what is wrong?
Right.
Yeah. And my first thought, and then there are discussions around it, okay, let's, I don't know, split up fire and police, make more room, solve the capacity issue. Yeah. Put more money into the building, and then the fire department, let's say, has a nice building here, and we find room somewhere for the police.
Yeah.
But what I hear from both of you is that you're saying the condition of the building is that even that scenario is not working.
The ductwork, the electrical, the way this has been built out over the years, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
probably some of the people that have done the work. It would, you'd really have to gut this down to its core, down to the brick. And basically start over. So would you be better off starting over with a new building for the fire? The issue they have now is with the newer apparatus,
Yeah,
they're
I saw
bouncing
that.
off the
Yeah.
ceiling down there.
Yeah.
So there's adjustments that need to be made. And my personal opinion is you're better off starting from the ground floor and building up with something new that meets the requirements than trying to, fix this and fix that to make it work.
Yeah,
Harry.
I'm sorry, but just to jump in there, that, even if the building, if there was a reasonable renovation cost and those things will work, and that's one of the things we'll put in the in that report is for us, the garage space, especially West Concord, but even here to a degree, as we
Yeah,
saw
we saw
before,
that.
with that notch beam for the ladder truck, so we're kind of up against even if it was decent condition, we're up against it in capacity, if you will, because of that.
Carrie, you have the hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've heard this yet, but, Chief, I'm wondering if you can comment on the space you need outside of the station for maneuvers. I mean, I've been through the parking lot and going under the ladder to try to exit, so,
That is that's a note that we had as well, is that, the side of the square footage space for the actual fire station itself, in our case, we just have, part of our daily operations are equipment checks and training. And in the property we're in right now, we end up either taking up, parking spaces or actually blocking off the travel lanes in and out of the building. And it just makes parking difficult or moving around the building difficult. And I can get into a lot more detail on both, later if you want, I can happy to today if you want, but later we can get into more detail on, what a modest, outside area would look like to be helpful for us to park our apparatus, to do equipment and vehicle checks, to do training checks, keep us in the centralized location. And then on top of that, with some new design features and fire stations, Lexington is one that has this, Maynard has this, I think Southborough has it. The facility is built with training in mind as well. So with some modest expansion of the square footage and footprint of the building, you can put some of that exterior training inside. And that does a couple factors too. It frees up some it makes the outward flow better. We're not in the way as often. And then frankly, in New England, it gives us a lot more quality use of that building all 12 months of the year. But we will happily provide more, much more detail on that in this report. Unless you want me to expand on a lot right now. I can bring up a couple of the very quick pictures, but a couple pictures of like Lexington's fire station. That's probably the best one that shows some that I have quickly available.
Can we touch a little bit on West Concord Fire Station?
Yeah, the West Concord Fire Station, that's probably, of the two stations, I would suggest that is probably the more critical in the sense of both, of all those things, of the capacity of it. The location is great, but the capacity, we fully maxed out the capacity when we added that ambulance in West Concord. And then again, the apparatus bay and door sizes were at the point where we're having to purchase custom apparatus that's costing more money to build smaller apparatus to fit into the station. So we're actually spending a little bit more money to purchase apparatus, and we're losing some components or space or water or ambulance space in it as well. And certainly if we end up with some growth patterns that continue to happen in West Concord, we have no room to grow both apparatus wise or personnel wise in West Concord. That building was built in the 30s, so that building is actually coming up on 100 years old as well. So there's a lot of maintenance work to keep it up. There's again, the capacity there, parking there's not zero, but it's very limited parking there. And there's really very limited space for that outdoor training area that the manager mentioned up in West Concord. Again, down the road, looking at growth, the EMS side alone, with Newbury Court expanding, with landmark recovery, with a handful of that happens to be in District 2's response district, that's an area that could see the need for more, more apparatus up there, another ambulance, for example. And we have zero room to build that out right now.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Same question, and that is, when I went through the West Concord fire station, I just didn't see a viable future for it. I've heard some rumblings that you can't increase the doors, can't change the exterior due to historic reasons. It's clearly not big enough. So I guess my question is, should we assume that location is not a viable option on its own, unless the town is able to secure either land behind it or next to it.
That's a very fair assumption. If we were able to acquire property around it, that would give us the potential to expand and build apparatus space suitable for modern day apparatus sites. And I do think what included in that, although right now that's not how we're set up operationally, we should consider the ability that it could house a ladder truck or a bucket truck or whatever, aerial device would be appropriate there. Again, not that it's up there right now, but should there be, as we develop and grow and we evaluate our operations, if there was a decision that the aerial device should be moved to West Concord, when we build out, it should have the capacity to fit any potential apparatus. Yeah, so especially the property behind it, next door would help as well. But honestly, that I think Chief Judge has talked about this before, and a lot of us agree with him, is that it seems like almost optimum for West Concord would be if you could get the space behind it, that would address a number of needs in West Concord. It would clearly give us the capacity we need. We could build out the property to manage the size of modern day apparatus, and depending on the space, would give a small area, a modest area for some of that exterior training areas to put a couple basic training props. And by that, we talk about auto extrication props with the ability to set up, deploy hose lines outside, flow water outside, search and rescue props, some tech rescue with ropes and confined space type of training. So an area like that, it's kind of an ideal mindset to think about, I guess. Whether that happens there or not, it would be an ideal mindset to think about what that would look like if we could acquire adjacent property.
Yeah, I just wanted for the group, so I just looked up the flood zone, so that property behind lives in the 500-year flood zone.
Is it in the 500? Is it but it's out, is it outside of the 100?
It's just like
Yeah,
2 feet.
okay. So that would be a.
Little margin for error.
So you have a little puddle you have to drive through that.
Exactly.
Sven, can I just make one point on
Yeah.
the police side, talking about training?
Yes,
That's, again, going future-proof in the day and age we live in, with everything they talk about with police reform. We really don't have any place internally to train.
Yeah.
You're in it. And this doubles as an EOC, so that's one of those areas, firearms. All sorts of training, classroom training, hands-on training. We don't have a location to do that.
Yeah.
And it's something that, I think is going to be very important in the next 10 to 15 years, without a doubt.
yeah, I think it's, Carrie, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say quickly about the property that's behind the West Concord station. That combined with the current station, I don't think is close to meeting the space requirements identified in the 2020 study. Whether it works or not is another story, but it is, I think, significantly different than what is called for in that study.
That was a joint complex though, wasn't it, Carrie? For both departments,
I think so.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about just fire station.
Just the
Yeah.
fire one, I think.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
missed that.
Yeah, I think we have to look at the different scenarios. Joined, completely separated. We have to have all options on hand to figure out what's best in the end, yeah. Judith?
I think you just addressed it, Sven. It's fine. I was just going to say there are engineering solutions around 500-year floodplains. So there are ways you can burn the back of the site and so forth. And there are several, I think there's 5 sites on Westgate. No, maybe 4 properties on Westgate that come around the cul-de-sac, right? So there are reconfiguration opportunities that also include the roadway. And then if the fire station was actually rebuilt, there could be a different entrance solution to Main Street from that because the current location is a really tight turn, as I understand it. So I think there are configuration opportunities that don't necessarily involve the 2 adjacent parcels. So instead, by going to the rear, I think, you know, Westgate does present some opportunities, but all of those parcels are currently privately owned.
Yeah, and just, I think if you have to reconfigure for the flood zone, you have to probably reconfigure the road, the Westgate Park Road, because that's in 100-year. Yeah, okay, but that's fine tuning here. Should we talk a little bit, again, we sometimes meander a little bit along our agenda. We had also on the agenda, the state and federal regulations that would affect the services. Is there anything, or Judith, you put that in here on the purpose, you had something specific in mind, then you put it on the agenda?
I did, because I imagine that there are regulations that certainly exist around number of personnel relative to population and so forth. But I believe the chiefs both mentioned different regulations that they are required to meet, or at least, you know, get close to. So if we can just get a list of those, and then that could also be backfilled into the conditions and capacity and location lists that you folks are putting together. And I think that's probably already what you're doing. It's where something is not meeting a regulation. Don't really, you know, a regulation doesn't have to be state or federal, could be other, but just identify the source of that regulatory requirement, right? I think you listed a few of them. It was too fast for me to write down what they were specifically, but I know they're at the tip of your tongue.
So. I often like in situations like that, just in the beginning, when everything is somehow possible or not possible. You're in this kind of Schrödinger cat situation in physics, where the 0 and the 1 are happening at the same time. So therefore, one question from my end is, that is a combined question. If you could dream something up and money would not be a problem, what was your dream? And the second question is, what are the results? You know what? I heard certain proposals over the last 20 years, 100 times, and I can tell you that ain't work. So if you have something, just fill us in. We're here collecting information.
I will give you the dream scenario. If we had the size of property to do it,
Yeah,
I would take what Natick has, where they are, that is I'll call it a complex over there.
okay.
And I would make sure it's big enough with the forward thinking to be able to, what do you have for staffing now?
Right now, 11 a shift, but
The total.
total 50 county ad.
Okay, to be able to go somewhere between them 75 to 100, and for us, we're at 36, to be able to project out to 50, 55, and have the ability to have, you know, a dedicated area for firearms training, which unfortunately will have to be probably within the building, not outside, a dedicated area for training, a training room where we can host trainings for other communities like we've been doing here. Parking places, workstations, computer workstations. I'm probably forgetting something, but a major complex where all that works, and then it's centralized.
Okay, you have to look at Kinetic.
So, I mean, our dream scenario would probably just be something, you know, more expanded on some of the deficiencies we talked about, a proper footprint for all of the items we've kind of talked about, you know, adequate fire station, space size, door width and height, enough bays to house everything. Again, we have a handful besides just fire trucks, ambulance, ladder. We have ATVs, we have the boat, we have a squad, we have command vehicles. So just adequate space for all of that, for admin, and probably the more dream scenario might be a real expansion on what the manager had talked about with our outdoor training. So aside of just trying to build in, which would still happen, you'd build in some internal training capacity to the fire station, would really be a much larger footprint. That's an exterior training area, including a small training building. Again, that's a very high-end dream, but you get a training building that allows us to do a ton more of training locally, managed just internally here, keeps us at our fire station. Again, our concern with location as a centralized spot, so we could do a tremendous amount of training without leaving the station. It puts lower miles of fuel usage, for example, on apparatus traveling to areas where we can do something. It keeps it centralized, and we can do more activity than we do now. We'd be able to run the gamut of, your basic, firefighter training, ground ladders, stretching hoses, to confined space, to ventilation, aerial ventilation, search and rescue. It just, I can go down the gamut of that, but it basically would be a much larger, everything we talked about in a much larger exterior footprint and a kind of, modest. Well, unless it's everything, we can get a huge building, but a modest dedicated training building as well.
Terry,
And then I think, I was good job, because you mentioned the one that would not be the best, 2229 Main Street, because again, an outskirt of town, definitely not centralized. And without some study, because again, I'm not an expert on some of this, but it would depend on the layout. I know, engineering can change a lot of, entrances, exits, what have you, but the prison property doesn't seem to be, as desirable of location for us based on location. And then congestion right there at Route 2. So all of our responses in and out, constant in and out in a very congested area. So it's really not a desirable place right now, depending on what engineering, plans came out of there and what the layout would look like. That's just a gut instinct on that.
Sven, I think what we're trying to say is we want a big enough parcel to be able to at least explore those possibilities. And that's what it really comes down to.
Terry, you had anything? in there?
Yeah, what I didn't hear in the dream scenario is, response. Just your response time. So Chief, I think you said 6 minutes. Right now, we're at 6 minutes, 80% of the time is,
Yeah.
does the dream scenario include a 5-minute radius?
I
90%
did
of the
have-
time, or does that exist?
No, well, I think a couple fold on that. One is the dream scenario with a bigger training area. I kind of implied the centralized location because it would keep companies in a station that's properly positioned for response time. I'd have to look at it a little closer, but to get that 90% benchmark for us is going to be. I don't know if there are areas that 2 stations alone would accomplish that. That would probably require a study, or would there potentially need to be a 3rd station? I'm not advocating that right now. I'm just suggesting that for us to meet the 90% benchmark, we have a few areas on the outskirts of town that are beginning to increase in our run volume. Nathan Pratt right now is one of them for us. And if there's ever an expansion or build out like we're seeing in West Concord now of 9 Acre Corner, that's another area that could result in some difficulty. So yes, to answer your question, the dream scenario includes everything I said for the property, but provided it's in that proper location for response times to meet that benchmark.
So how do you work with surrounding towns and their respective departments? Let's say if there's a something just on the border to Acton or just on the border to Bedford, are you working together when they have a shorter?
We do it, yeah, we have a combination of ways we do that is if we're unavailable, it would be mutual aid response to cover or backfill for it.
Yeah.
And then there are, depending on occupancy, high hazard occupancy or certain target hazards, to that point, we'd call a line box response. Where we would also include that town to respond with us.
Yeah.
Automatically, even if it's a report of a smoke detector, for example. So we do work in conjunction with the surrounding towns on that.
We work with mutual aid.
Yeah.
Mutual aid is sort of our bread and butter, to be quite
Mhm.
honest, if it's severe enough and it calls for it, or if we're tied up on other calls, but. And Carrie, I just want to go back on the police side. Response times are, don't tell the whole picture because we're very fluid. We're not responding from the station. And I think everyone knows that, but our response time can be skewed if we are sending cruises from Upper Monument Street or to Upper Monument Street from from downtown or even from the other side of town. So it doesn't really show the whole picture. I think for us, it's more centered on having the ability to, have the room we need to do what we need to do without going down the whole bullet list.
Yeah, it's just you have to balance, like if the two operations want to stay together. Right, so it's a balance between that and the fire response time, which is critical. The other thing I want to throw out that I know I said to retired Chief Judge is, what about a small sub at 2229 Main to take care of Nathan and responding in to take care of Nathan Pratt and the 40B that may happen and any other growth out there.
Yeah, if something like that was an option, that could open up a little bit to properties in. Where Station 2 currently is, because if we had a substation on that end, that would also address some response times heading towards West Concord Center. So if there was an alternate property for the current Station 2, it could shift. It could shift a little bit to out of that center to an edge, because now you have two stations coming into that area. Anytime you build stations, it does add to the staffing discussion. That's one thing we'd think about, have to talk about as well and identify as well. But yeah, another station up in that area, especially with those other projects going on. That would certainly help, because as much as that's on the line, we actually go through Acton and kind of quasi Sudbury, but Acton to get up to Nathan Pratt anyway.
Yes.
You know, so that's still, and then we have Forest Ridge, you know, that's, you know, there's a decent amount of activity on Forest Ridge, so.
Yeah, Judith and then Mark again.
Thank you, Sven. A quick question about training, because training seems to be a major functional objective for both police and fire. How often are we engaging in active training? Is this something that, you know, and I recognize it might be a different occurrence rate for police versus fire, but is this something that folks are doing every week, every month? So if you had some specialized training, particularly I'm imagining sort of the exterior facilities where you can do specialized exercises, and there's different kinds of, like, you know, buildings that are built expressly for training purposes, like just concrete block tall towers sort of thing. How intensively would those spaces be used? So if they were built and we needed, you know, another 2,000 square feet of footprint in order to accommodate training, are these going to be used once a week for a day, every 2 weeks for a day, once a month for a day? Something about intensity of use, I think folks will ask about that.
Sure, the fire department, we train daily, so would the building itself be used daily? I would venture to say, because it depends on the training we're doing. For example, if it's EMS training and it's a comprehensive EMS day, that might be more classroom or just in a classroom doing practical work. But we do fire training, unless the run volume that day is so extensive, you know, we're out on response all day long. Just about every day we're training, so multiple times a week would be using an outdoor property. In conjunction, that's a common practice in the industry anyway, is just regular routine training. You know, we can get into the reasons why if you'd like, but training every day, training on everyday skills to just build muscle memory, and often training on technical skills in you know, in the EMS field called HALO, high acuity low occurrence skills, so that you're ready for those really unique times you have to respond. That in conjunction with right now, what we're going through is a fire department that is about probably a third of the department has less than 5 years on the job with us. So that need for training is even highlighted based on the volume of new people we have. But even once we go through that cycle, training is a daily occurrence for us.
So on the police side, I'll break it down in a couple different forms without going too in depth. Firearms training is probably the biggest issue we have right now. For as long as I've been doing this, and when I got my bread and butter on training years ago, it's always been suggested we have at least we train 4 times a year with firearms. We're now at 3. The state has gone to a mandate where they want some training done twice a year within the in-service cycle, which goes with the fiscal cycle. So that usually means something in the fall and something in the spring. We are totally reliant on other communities so we can accomplish that training. We have no place here in town to do it. So we schedule a week, we push to get everybody in a week, and then if we have some outliers that we find other places to go to. that's becoming more and more of a burden in this day and age, and everybody talks about reform, and the big thing that came out of reform was de-escalation. We don't get the ability to do much more than practice what we use our firearms for. Having said that, getting to the de-escalation side of things, and in particular, because we're gonna run into this now with taser training. We don't have a location here in the building really where we can do that, so either we have to find some range space somewhere, or we make do within the confines of this room or out back behind the police station. That's something that's required biannually as well as annually to do certain things. Now we get into other forms of what they call less lethal force, whether it's OC spray, pepper spray, hands-on training, baton training. Simply being able to talk to people and learn how to do that. We should be doing that on average once a month. We're not anywhere near that. And we're not the only department. I don't want to say poor Concord, it's not that. It's just we're reliant to get that training in other places. And that includes sending people out for training, which costs money to do, and time, and taking them off the line, where if we had a dedicated training area, we could have them, we could pull them off the line, train and put them back on the line in the same shift.
Okay, Mark?
So, my question is there any synergy that exists today having the fire and police next to each other, that if we separated the two departments, we'd lose that synergy or benefit?
This is just my opinion. I think, again, we've been here like the longest. I think that synergy exists because we're in such close proximity. We know each other, we like each other, we work very, very well together. Having said that, I think the circumstances that we're looking at within the town and where we can do things and make this work may very well push that we're in two separate locations. Do I think it will change anything? I'd like to think not, but in reality, we don't know. I still think we have that very good working relationship, and I think a lot of the code training that we do and a lot of the working together we do, whether it's for parades or it's hurricanes or anything else, I think brings that bond closer together. And I think given, again, what's available to us out there, it may make more sense to separate the two of us. That way, both sites will accomplish what each department needs.
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, operationally, I don't think there's a, there's a dramatic desire that, meaning operationally from a shift response perspective. Like the captain said, this synergy, we get, everyone interacts very well together. But I don't think there's really a need to be in the same location for that. I think a lot of the interaction with police and fire in the same building, which makes it very convenient, is the administrative level. We're always meeting administratively, and that's gonna happen even in two sites. I think it would just mean we'd make a little more of an effort for communicating by phone, traveling to each other's stations. So yeah, I don't think separating the two buildings would really impact, especially the response side. There'd really be no impact we wouldn't be losing a need on the response side, and the admin side would be able to work that out.
I think this community is unique in the fact that both departments get along very, very well. I think you could put one in West Concord and one in East Concord, and I think that still is gonna happen. I just think it's the nature of the town and the structure and the employees that we hire.
Yeah,
At that time.
that's great. I guess the question I'm asking is more of like an HR question. In other words, are there any, is there a common dispatcher? Is there a common employee that if we split the two departments up, now we're creating a new FTE for one of those departments because there was one jointly served you guys?
Yeah, no, there'd be no, and actually, it's just interesting, you mentioned dispatch, with the new ECC manager position, all three, look at it as three departments. As we do now, could coexist together. You could put all three in a separate location and it wouldn't affect FTEs, right?
Okay. Wow. What a download, a lot of information. Judith, I'm looking a little bit at you because you're the mastermind of things we need to get us to the next level. So, you feel we got for today what we needed to get?
Well, I will say I found this conversation fantastically helpful. So, thank you again, very much, everybody who's on the call, certainly, and the chiefs. I think if we had 2 more minutes, I would ask if the chiefs could recommend stations or communities other than perhaps Lexington and Natick that might be part of a benchmarking exercise. And if the chiefs had any resources that we might be able to allocate to conducting a benchmarking exercise, where I think we could look at, other communities and ask, how did they approach it? Do they have a single campus with police and fire combined along the lines of Mark's great question? Do they have subs? Where is their sub? How many bays do they have? What's their ground floor footprint, which is a really big driver, certainly for fire stations, versus their total footprint? What did it cost? When did they build a building? All that kind of stuff. And even potentially we could set up some site visits. If you picked your top 3, I think that would be a fantastic help. So yeah, I try and say that more efficiently, but if you had some suggestions for benchmarking, not only where, but how we might go about it using some of your resources and networks, that would be my last thing.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah, so Judith, a couple more places worth looking at. Southborough, they're fairly new. Chelmsford's a little bit older now, but there was just something about the way they set up that facility and where they came out of, which was probably a building similar to this back in the day. Another one that's worth noting is, I believe, I haven't seen it, Newton, I believe, is brand new. I'm drawing a blank. There was one other place. Lexington is brand new. I've been in there once. I haven't seen the whole building. I know they're a little more centralized, so I'm not really sure what their issues are with parking over there. We can reach out to area chiefs, both on the police and fire side, to set up any tours you want. In terms of benchmark measuring, I mean, if you look at the comparisons between the agencies in terms of just staffing numbers, that might help a little bit, but I don't know if it'll tell the whole story.
Yeah, I think on the fire side, the side of Lexington, Natick and Maynard, which we mentioned, Southborough is another good one. Bedford is actually underway with the new fire station. I think was it Foxborough?
Foxborough, yeah.
But yeah, we on that note, we definitely could look for some other ones. We would reach out and it would have the ability to do that now. We could reach out, and I think, like you said, which we would do anyway. I think it'd be prudent to do, would be to reach out to those places and ask them generally what was their mindset, what were they looking at, what were their benchmarks, what were their standards that they looked at, and get an idea of their process leading up to it. And then same thing, we could arrange for tours of those stations to look at, kind of look at the, what are the modern day recommendations, what are the things we should be thinking about, whether they're compliance issues or just good operational issues. We could put that together and then pick whatever appropriate ones would be good for a site visit.
Mark?
Hey, Brian, is Sudbury new? Did I hear that correctly?
Sudbury is, oh, you're right, yeah, Route 20, yeah, Station 2, that is new, correct, yeah, Sudbury Station. Did they do anything with the police? The police station is
Police
like
is maybe 15
15,
years old
20
now.
years old, yeah. But they did build a new fire station out on Route 20.
I mean, what would be interesting is it would really be interesting to have a conversation with some of the chiefs who maybe got new facilities 10 years ago and sort of have the lessons learned. Gee, I thought we needed this, but in actuality, we didn't. So any sort of, not only, forward looking, thinking, but also, benchmarking with, I'm sure you guys have good relationships with a lot of our peer towns. I'd love to understand, sort of if they had to do it again, what that might change, and I suspect there are a couple things. And then I'll note, I spent a fair amount of time in Bedford And it's amazing to me that those guys literally cleared a historic building and are now doing a huge amount of demolition, regardless of the historic commission there. So I don't know how that happened, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah, yeah. And from our perspective, we look at Bedford just on the process and building itself, not hinting towards the historical district items.
Okay, Mark, you still have something?
Yeah, I think that I've sort of, I think at the MCI conversation we had earlier, or maybe, all the weeks are merging here, but I think that at least I'm in the must-have scenario. So with must-have comes compromise, and it's going to be, the Chiefs are going to have to compromise a little bit, maybe historic compromises a little bit, maybe from a budgetary standpoint. So I don't want to take things off the table necessarily just because, for example, there are preconceived notions as to what has to happen, for example, from a historic district perspective.
Okay. Good. I think if I look at our agenda, we meandered around 4, 5, and 6. We covered a lot of ground. I think we're getting to the end of this, and I would like to see any public comments. Carlin Reed.
Thanks. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End, member of the Finance Committee. Speaking on my own behalf, what I haven't heard is about a timeline. As you know, in FinCom, we're going to be engaged in financial reserves and stabilization funds, and I kind of like to plan for big expenses, and I just want to know if you folks have an idea of how long out, how far out you're thinking about making these revisions, because we can set money aside, but it'd be nice to know what the timeline is from the time that your group issues a recommendation to the time that we actually need to borrow the money. Thanks.
Yeah, just my 2 cents on this, I think, is this fiscal year is used to build out the timeline and the budget needs. If I look at your timeline for the next fiscal year, I doubt that we will be able to give you already for the next fiscal year planning, let's say, a timeline and all the different things. So what I would advise that FinCom is doing, if you look at your 10-year capital planning, to have some placeholders generally along the timeline to say, we know somewhere in the next 10 to 15 years, there will be capital needs for fire, police, and public works. I think at the moment, I don't see that you get this before February, March, or whatever. Yeah. Just to be realistic, I don't want, yeah. Mark.
So I think Carlin makes a really good point. I think it's in the back of our heads, Carlin, so we're not forgetting about it. But I do think that at some level, one of the jobs we're going to have to fulfill here is sort of understand a priority and in staggering these projects.
Yes.
I'll go back to a 10-year capital budget that no one seems to be able to find. It was in excess of 350 million, and it sort of put everyone's wish list together. The reality is I sort of view this as, all the spending we did on the schools, 100 million here, 100 million here, spread out in a couple of years is the same sort of unfortunate future we're all looking at. So I think part of it is what's the greatest need, and then prioritize it and hopefully fit all the pieces in the puzzle. But it's a complex, multi-dimensional puzzle. But I agree with you. We can't do all this at once.
Yeah. Okay, any other public comment? I don't see another hand up. So before we adjourn, we haven't said who's making, who's doing the minutes. I wrote stuff down on a sizable piece of paper. I can volunteer to take the minutes of this meeting, if that's okay, unless someone else is volunteering. No, okay, so Judith, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I said I have 9 pages of notes.
Oh,
So
wow,
so I don't want to take the minutes, but
okay,
I'm happy for you to if you want to take the first stab.
Yeah,
Sven,
I will take a first step,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
gonna be enough just to track this amazing conversation.
so, I will draft the minutes, with that, I think we're good to adjourn, everyone, yeah? Great. It's 4:37.